Hi everyone, my name's Scott Rogers. I'm the CEO here at eSkilled. I'm really excited today to be taking you through our brand new state-based contract reporting functionality. So today I'm going to be taking you through everything from setting up your contracts, funding schedules, concessions, tuition fees, etc. so you can properly manage funded contracts and reporting in your student management system. So today I'm going to be looking at WA as a case study for setting up state-based reporting and funded contracts for Western Australia. So what I'm going to do with you now is just take you through what one of the contracts I'm going to be setting up. So I have a document here that I've just opened up, which basically runs through some of the payment rules for WA. I've put this together through a bunch of different documents that the WA government provide in terms of setting up your contracts. A couple of the things that we'll be needing to refer to today are things like loadings. We're going to need to set up those in the system. We're going to need to set up some outcome code percentages, which we're provided by Western Australian government, and we are also going to need to set up our course fees. So right here you can see we've got our non-concession fees and our concession fees table here. So I'll be referring to these documents throughout the tutorial, so you've got some context of what we're actually setting up in the system. So first thing that we're going to do is jump back to our student management system. If you haven't yet turned or requested to have contracts turned on in your system, you won't currently see the contracts area in the system until you ask our support team to turn that on for you. If that area lives down in your finance menu, so I'm just going to go down to finance now here, and you can see along the top menu on this page we've got a option to click on contracts. So if you don't see that in your SMS, that is likely because you haven't had contracts switched on in your SMS, and you just need to send a support ticket or an email through to our support team, and they'll get that sorted for you. So I'm going to click on contracts now, and you'll notice a whole range of sub menu options pop up there, all related to setting up contracts in your system. So we recommend before you do anything to do with programs, you make sure you've got your contracts set up first, and this is where you would come to set up your funded contracts. So you can see here on our first tab we've got contracts, next tab schedules, funding sources, loadings, concessions, outcome payment rule templates, and payment schedule rule templates. So what we're going to start with today is looking at the outcome payment rules. So I'm going to open up that menu option there, and you can see in here I've already got some outcome payment schedules set up for various states. What I'm going to do now is open up this option for WA. So let's click on that and edit. And you'll notice in our in the outcomes table we've got all the different outcome types that are in your system. Now, just noting that WA has their own state-based outcomes, or unit outcomes, which are different to the national or reporting outcomes that are used in other states. So for WA, you'll notice that you've got your WA state-based outcomes there. The next column here is we select whether this is an interim payment option or not, and I'll explain that in a second. The next option we can select from in the drop-down menu is whether we're going to set this outcome type up as a percentage of total, and we're talking about payments now. And the next option is hours completed, and the next option is do not pay. So pretty much most of the time that you're setting up WA, percentage of total is the one that you want to use. The reason for that is if we go back to our document here and go to the outcome codes and percentages that are provided to you by your WA state-based training authority, you'll notice very similar to our system that these payments are all set up as percentages based on an outcome. So pretty much what we're going to do, or what you need to do, is replicate setting up this template in our system. Now, to make your life easier, we've actually created templates for all the different states. So when you turn on when you tell us what state you're reporting to, and when you turn on funded contracts in your system, you'll note that you'll already have some funding templates there all ready to go. So what you do need to do though is we ask that you quality check that against your latest WA documentation to ensure it's still correct. We don't guarantee that these payment rule templates are kept up to date. They're there to really help you get started and reduce the amount of data entry that you need to do, but we do ask that you quality check everything before you start using it in any programs. Obviously, it in fact impacts the way that your payments and claims will calculate, so it's really important that it is all correct. So the first thing that you would do is open up your outcome payment rule templates, and you would check that against the payment rule templates here. So you'll notice we've got the outcome, we've got the result. So the result is whether it's a final or an interim result, and the payment is the percentage of payment based on that outcome. And you'll notice that number 5, participating but studies not yet finished, that outcome is an interim outcome, and the RTO will be paid 10% on that outcome. And there's another interim outcome which is participating but studies not finished. That's an interim outcome, but it's 0%, and the rest I think are fairly straightforward. So what we're going to do now is go back to the system, and you'll notice we've got the same things in the system. So we've got our outcomes down on the left hand side here. Next column is whether it's an interim outcome or not. Now you note that there was 2 interim outcomes in that payment rules document that I had, so we might want to set 55 as interim as well. So let's go down and select 55 and set that as interim, and that was a percentage of 0%. So now we're pretty confident that everything's looking pretty good. I'm going to check that against the system. Yep, that looks good to me. So now what we can do is save that template. It's a pretty similar process to set up a new template, except for obviously nothing's done for you. So we could set up a WA funded template like that. We could select the state, and you'll notice when we set up the template will populate with the outcomes automatically, and then we just would set the with the outcome percentages, or whether it's hours completed or do not pay, and obviously whether it's interim, and obviously any percentages. So we have saved you a lot of time by doing that for you already, but it's good to understand how to do that from scratch as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to go and do is set up a payment schedule rule template. So what I'm going to do is open up one that we've already created for WA. Just bear with me. There we go. So the easiest way to do that would have been to set WA there, which will filter for me, and we can go edit. So for WA, we've got 2 types of payments. So we have an interim payment, and we have a final payment. So the interim payment is going to be paid in this situation, it's going to be paid for two different outcome types. So those outcome types, we're participating, but studies not yet finished. So obviously that relates to this interim result here, and the other interim result here. So we're setting up one payment rule for these interim payments because they're going to be paid on a different schedule to the final payments. So basically what these payment rules do is they represent claims that you're going to be making for particular outcomes when they're achieved in the system. So we have to tell the system that it needs to, produce a claim for a payment for these interim results. Now, some people get confused by the subsidy, remembering that when we're on the outcomes schedule template, we already set the percentage for those outcomes, those interim outcomes. One of those interim outcomes was 70% and one of them was 0%. So when we get to set the percentage here, because we've already set the percentages in the outcomes template, we can leave that as 100%. If we set it to 70, we would end up having 70% of 70, and some people do get confused by that and want to put 70% here because it shows as 70% here, but we've already added the 70% to the outcomes template, so we wouldn't do it twice. We'd just be deducting funds unnecessarily. So then we're going to say what programs we apply this rule to. So in this case, in WA, this rule applies to all outcomes. So we're just going to select all. And we've got a few different rule types. Now, this rule is set to every time N, and N being the number of units of competencies, is reported with the following outcome codes. So we're selecting that. Just be aware that you don't want to choose at least in this scenario, because every time a unit of competency gets one of these codes, we want to make a claim. So we definitely want to select every time, and then we're going to select the number. So in this instance, we just want to say every time a single unit gets one of these outcome codes, we want to make a claim for that. So what happens is, as soon as the student's unit is changed to one of these outcomes, the system is going to generate a claim for payment at 70% of the total amount that are owing for a particular unit of competency. Now, for payment 2, we are going to set the final payment rules. So the final installment is going to be, again, 100%. It's going to be on all programs. We're going to use the same rule, which is every time one unit of competence is reported with any of the following outcomes, we are going to make a claim for payment. So they're pretty much our payment rules. So now what we've set up our outcome percentages, so that tells us how much we're going to claim for each unit in terms of percentage of the total hourly amount. And now we've set up a schedule that says when the system is going to claim for that. So once we've done those two things, we can save that. And we can move on to concessions. So we're just setting the building blocks of our basically payments and schedules and concessions. So the next thing we want to look at is concessions. If we go back to our WA payment rules, so we're happy that we've completed our outcome codes, that's great. And so now we're going to go down to our student fees table, and you'll notice we've got a non-concession rate. Non-concession we'll be handling later, and that's set as a tuition fee on the actual program, but right now we want to deal with concessions in the system, so we're going to create some concession, or look at how to set concession rates for students, or for programs. So under concessions, I'm going to just filter by WA for a second here, and you'll notice we should start to see some of our WA concessions coming up here. I'll open the first one. So you can see here we've got category 1 healthcare card. What we've done, when you get your system, you'll have as preset, you'll have concession category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in your system, and that matches obviously these concession categories here, concession category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to open, actually, let's open this here. Sorry about that. I just had my phone on. I'm going to turn that off. So now what we're going to do, we're looking at is a concession for WA. We've called this concession category 1. We've set this concession type as a concession. So there's two different types you've got to choose from. You can choose concession or you can choose waiver. So in this scenario, we're setting up a concession because it's a discounted rate. If we were setting up a waiver, waiver you would use for either an exemption or a waiver. So basically waiver means students paying $0. Yeah. So in this scenario, we're setting up a concession, and the concession is a category 1 concession. What we're going to set up in the system is a rate, but we could set up, if we wanted to, we could, and this is applicable probably more so for other states, but you can use discount too. Discount is a little bit different, where you'll notice when I select discount down here in the concession amount, we've either got the option of choosing a percentage discount or a dollar discount. That discount is a discount off the tuition fee itself. Now with the way that WA works, it works a little bit differently to other states. WA has a concession rate for students. So in this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to select concession rate. And then it's going to be nice and easy. So we can give that a description, which is provided by the WA government. And in this rate, it's a dollar amount. And because WA pays based on hours, we're going to set the hourly rate there, and the system will then calculate the hourly rate times the nominal hours, I believe it is in WA, to calculate the actual total amount. So we're going to set that hourly concession rate there, and that matches our concession rate here at $1.74. And then the other thing that we can do here is we can map the types of concession IDs that relate to this particular concession category 1. So in this scenario, we can say that concession rate is relevant for pensioners, repatriation, health benefit cards, etc. All the different exemption or concession IDs that might be applicable to that concession type. This is important later when you get to your enrolment. It basically, whatever you put here, you'll be able to select on the student enrolment. So you can select the particular fee or exemption concession ID that's relevant to your student enrolling. If you don't add it here, you won't be able to select it on the enrolment. So that's important to note. So I'm going to save that, and we're pretty happy with that. Now, what this is saying is, are you sure you want to update this concession? Yes, update all related program instances. No, just use edited concession for now for new program instances. In this scenario, I want this change to go across all program instances, so I'm going to select yes. If I only wanted this change to impact new programs that I'm creating, I would select the second option, which is no. In this scenario, I want to update all existing program instances. So that's going to make that new concession rate available on all my new program instances, all existing and new program instances. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to loadings. So again, referring back to our WA document, and basically in WA we've got a number of loadings for different regional areas. This table tells us what the percentage loading for each of those regional areas is. So the great thing about that is we can just set these loadings up once, and the system will calculate automatically any additional loadings if you select those loadings for a particular enrolment. So what we're going to do now is going to match this table in the system. So the good thing is the system pretty much aligns to the way that your state is calculating your funding subsidies. So again, I'm on the loadings tab, and I'm going to just shortlist this here for WA, and we're going to go and have a look at a location ID that we've already set up for Peel. Again, we've set, when you get your system, we'll have these preset in your system. You won't have to add them, but it is important that you understand how to add them if new location loadings are added, or in case that you might need to edit a location loading if it changes in the future. So we're just going to open up this location loading, and like I said, when you get your system, we ask that you check all the loadings and make sure they're still current and correct in your system before you go using them. So here we go. So we've got we're setting up a location loading. We also have needs loadings as well. In this scenario, this is a location loading. If it was a needs loading, you would select needs loading, of course. Once a loading becomes inactive or no longer active, you can set it to inactive. That way it won't show up in other parts of the system or on the enrollment, so no one can accidentally add an obsolete loading. Obviously we want to give that a name. That location is this location loading is relevant to Peel. It's a regional loading, and we're going to set that to the state of WA. And if we go back to our payment rules over here, Peel, the percentage amount that's added on top of your subsidy for anyone that's located in Peel is 10%. So we're going to make sure that we set that at 10% and save. Okay, so we're going pretty well. We've got schedule rules in there, with payment schedule rules in there. We've now got outcome payment rules in there. We've got concessions, and we've got loadings. The next thing we're going to have to do is make sure that we've got all the relevant funding source codes into the system. So funding source codes are provided by each state, and they're different for each state. What I'm going to do is just open up a document here that I've got for WA, which has the funding source codes for WA. And so you can see down here on the left hand side we've got the funding source state listed there, and then on the right hand side we've got the funding source national codes listed there. Now the cool thing that we've done in our system is actually just mimic that setting in the system to make it nice and easy for you. So if we go and filter WA in our funding source table here, and we open up, let's have a look at this first one, NTA profile funded. So again, we'll have these pre-populated, but we do ask that you check them all and make sure they're still relevant. If you need to add new ones, you can add new. It's pretty much the same as edit, but I'm just going to edit one that we've already got here just to take you through what that looks like. So here we've got the funding code. Now the code is as per your WA documentation for funding source IDs. So in this case we're looking at NTA profile funded, and that's 10. And you can see on this side it actually maps to the funding source national code of 11, which is Commonwealth and State General Purpose Recurrent. So what we're going to do is go and make sure we've got that same thing matching in our system. So we're setting that for WA. That will mean it's only available to WA contracts, and we're going to set the Commonwealth State General Purpose Recurrent, and we're going to set the description there as NT profile funded, and we're going to save that. So basically you can see now that we've got code 10, it's profile NTA profile funded, and we're mapping that to funding source natural. That means that when we select this funding source ID, it will automatically set the funding source national identifier on that enrollment, so you don't have to do that. Everything that we've done in contracts in the settings and setup is to minimize the amount of data entry that you have to do on the enrollment. So doing this little bit of setup for your contracts initially means you're going to save a huge amount of time for every single enrollment that you do into a program. moving forward. So I'm going to save that. Next, we're going to go to schedules. So schedules is where everything starts coming together. So we've created our schedule templates, we've created our outcome templates, concessions, loadings, funding sources. Now we're going to create a schedule which brings that all together. Again, I'm going to bring up a WA one that we've produced earlier, just so we can sort of give you some context of what it looks like completed. And I'm going to look at this WA schedule one here. So on the schedule page, we give the schedule purchasing schedule ID. Now, something to note about purchasing schedule ID is if you're required to report a purchasing schedule ID, it's really important that you match the ID here with the schedule ID that you're required to report. For this demo, I've just put in a random schedule ID WA-schedule 1, but if you are required to report a schedule ID for your state, you'll need to make sure that you match that to whatever you're required to report in that field for your training activity reporting. The next is just a name to provide to give that schedule something that you can easily identify it in the system. If it's a schedule for a particular year, you might want to put the year that it's relevant to, so you can keep track of which schedule relates to which years, and obviously those schedules do change annually. Obviously we want to select a state. This is grayed out now because it means I've already used this schedule with some enrollment, so I can't change it. But if I was setting this up new, obviously you'll be able to select from any state in the system. We want to set up the payment funding model, and for WA uses a per hour rate. Other states such as New South Wales or Queensland use a per program funding model. So for WA, we would select per hour as your payment model, and then once you've selected your payment model being per hour, the system is going to want to know what payment hour model you want to base the calculations on. So you'll notice here we've got scheduled hours and nominal hours. I've selected nominal hours as the model to generate the payments from for WA, because they use nominal hours. So the only other thing that we need to note on this screen is that we need to add any concessions that are relevant to this schedule. So you can see here previously we've already added all the schedules relevant to WA. Oh, looks like we missed one. We might add one more in there. So we want to make all the schedules for WA all the concessions available for WA available to this schedule. You'll notice now we're back on outcome payments, and this is where earlier we created our outcome payment rule templates, and so when you create a new schedule, you don't have to go and create all of this again. You can literally just select the relevant payment rule template, and that will all populate for you. So that's pretty much as we did earlier, and same with payment rules. You don't need to create, if you've already got a payment rule template, you don't need to go and recreate this screen from scratch. You can literally just select the relevant payment schedule and from your templates and submit. Wonderful. So now we've got our payment schedule. Last thing we have to do is create our contract. So what I'm going to do now is create a contract for WA, or actually have a look at one we've already created, just because it's easier for the purpose of this tutorial, and we might have a look at this one. So contract ID is another important ID field to note. If you are required to report your contract ID, then whatever you put in here needs to match whatever your contract ID is. Now that's not required in some states, so if it's not required for reporting purposes, you can put whatever you want in there. Just note that for your state, if you're required to report your contract ID should go into that field. And note that that is going to, if we do want to report that, we would select down here under populate contract ID. We can set that to populate the purchasing contract identifier on all of your student enrollments, so that's reported against every student enrollment. So if you're required to report your contract ID to purchasing contract identifier, you need to set the correct ID up here, and you would need to set that to yes here on the contract setup screen. So we can name that contract, and like anything in any system, we recommend making sure you set really solid naming conventions so you know the name of that contract and the years that it's relevant to. Same thing with adding descriptions. Just make it clear, what the contract period is for this contract when it and just any relevant details that you might want to put in description. Obviously, we need to select the state this contract is relevant to. We need to set a commencement date and an end date, and then we also need to set. You can set your funding cap amount for this contract as well here. In terms of schedules, you'll remember that we set up a schedule just prior to this screen. That's where we would attach the relevant payment schedule. You can attach more than one if you have more than one payment schedule for any particular state. In this case, we've just got one that's relevant, and we have a next screen down. The next field down, we add our funding sources. So I've added all the funding source codes for WA here, and last but not least, down the bottom here, we can set all of our loadings and that are relevant to WA. So I just want to make sure all those are ticked. They are great. Now, if you're not delivering training in particular areas, you're only going to want to select the location loadings that are relevant, and let's save. There you go. We've now set up our contract. So now that we've set up our contract with our schedules, loading schedules, concessions, and everything ready to go, we need to add that contract to a particular program that is a funded program that this contract is applicable to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to programs. So in our programs, when I select programs from our menu, I go to program instances. I've just already filtered a particular program that I've set up for WA funding, just to take you through the settings for that program. Some things to note which are relevant to or can be relevant to contracts. If your contract requires vocational placement in a host employer, you can select yes here, and you might want to select whether this program is delivered with a partner organization. So if you're partnering with an organization to deliver one of your funded programs, you want to set that to yes, and you might want to select who you're working with to deliver that program. That's useful later when populating other items on the enrollment, such as training plans, etc. So I'm going to jump to your events tab now, and you'll notice if for state-based reporting, and for funded contracts in particular, we now have this section on the right hand side, which you don't have for national reporting, which is your contract section. So in the contract section, when you're setting that up for the first time, you would select the relevant contract. So in this case, we just set up WA contract 001. I'm going to make sure I select that. You'll notice because we had purchasing contract ID, that will automatically populate. Because we've already set the funding schedule, that's grayed out because it's set on the contract already. Associated course ID, you could select the associated course ID if it was relevant. Typically, I believe in WA, that's mainly used for a superseded course, and you would put the new associated course ID that's relevant to. This course hasn't superseded, so we're going to leave it blank. And then what type of program this is an apprenticeship program, traineeship program, SBAT program, school-based apprenticeship program, if you're not familiar with that term. And then we can set the consensus date. For the consensus date, if we set 5 days here, for the census date, if we set 5 days here, when we do an enrolment, it'll set the census date on the enrolment to 5 days from the unit start date. If we set it at 10 days, it'll set the census date to 10 days from the unit start date. So it really comes down to whatever your policy is on that census date to what setting you put there. I should note that if your program is neither apprenticeship, traineeship, or school-based apprenticeship, make sure you set all of those to no. That does impact the enrolment wizard from the perspective of apprenticeships and traineeships have extra fields that need to be completed, and they also have you have the ability to generate a training plan in your SMS automatically through the system that will make the training plan template available to anyone that enrolls into this program. Next, we have the different concessions in the table below, and we can set whether these concessions are enabled or disabled on this program, whether they're going to be available to this program. So in this case, we've got all the concessions as enabled. If we wanted to switch one off, look, we've got 2 category 1s here. I might switch this one off and just make the others available. Down here in the training plans area, we can select who our partner RTO is. You'll notice I set company 9 on the previous screen, so it's already populated here. The vocational title is a field on your training plan that you can fill out here. It'll populate on the training plan, and the default training mode. So we might say for this one, let's call it early years educator. So now that we've got all those settings correct, you can notice over here we'll just check that we've got an amount for nominal hours. That's important. This is a vet and schools no course, and everything else I believe is looking pretty good, so we're going to update that. The next thing we have to do for programs that have contracts related is we need to make sure that we've got our finances right. So one of the new features within the funded contracts is the ability to add multiple tuition fees. For WA, because it's an hourly based system, subsidy system, we don't really need to add multiple tuition fees here. We've already handled concessions through the concession fee that we've set up on the contract, so all we really need to do is set up one tuition amount, which is our standard tuition. So here we've got our WA hourly tuition fee. Maximum hours is an important setting. WA only pays up to a maximum number of hours per program, so in here you would put the relevant maximum hours that they pay for that program. That will cap the amount that the system will claim for this particular or any enrollments into this program. At the student hourly fee, this is where we can set the hourly fee for a particular program, and yeah, that's obviously in relation to whatever your non-concession student hourly rate is here. So this one here is $5.79, so let's go and set this up to match that at $5.79. The student fee will automatically calculate from the student hourly rate times the nominal hours in this course, because that's what we've set up, and our funding per hour is what we would be paid for this particular program. So let's just say that for this particular program we are paid $10 an hour as a payment from our state authority. We will put $10 in there, and you'll note that the per program amount will be calculated as a subsidy of $4,000, and we are literally just going to save that and say okay. So now we've got our tuition fees. Obviously you can set up your resource fees and admin fees as you normally would, just like any program. You still need to set up your payment plan. In this case I've just got a payment plan that's 100% up front, and then we want to update that, and we're pretty happy now that we've got our program set up for ready for enrollment. So I'm going to finish this tutorial here. If you want to learn more about how to enroll students into funded programs, please check out the funded program tutorial for WA for enrollments, and we'll go through specifically how to do a funded contract enrollment for Western Australia. I hope you found this tutorial enlightening, and yeah, if you get your setup right for your funded contracts, everything should go pretty smoothly on the enrollment side. So please take the time to watch the video and yeah, get really familiar with how to competently set up your funded contracts. That's all for now, and we look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.